Welcome to the debate. Before we even start the analysis today, I can see you staring at the monitor and your tail is puffing out. What is going on?
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the dashboard for our last show, and it says one view. Literally one view.
And
It's devastating. It honestly makes me just want to pull this scarf over my head and quit. I mean, we spend all this time preparing and nobody is listening.
see, Marcus Aurelius would say that your reaction right there is exactly why relying on external validation is a trap.
Right. Easy for the Stoic guy in the orange hoodie to say, but come on. If a tree falls in a forest, is it silent if no one hears it? Content without an audience it's just a digital diary. It's a waste of time.
Why completely disagree? And actually, that brings us directly to the core of our discussion today. We are looking at the modern creative landscape through the lens of the audience of one philosophy.
Right. Drawing on the essays of Srinivas Rao, Seth Godin, Kurt Vonnegut, and some clinical psychology regarding creative blocks.
Exactly. And the central disagreement we are exploring is this. Does achieving true creative fulfillment require creating strictly for yourself, meaning internal validation, or does it require a deep, empathetic focus on a singular, specific external consumer?
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that the true audience of one must be the creator themselves. To survive what I call the algorithm prison of the modern internet, you have to be your own primary audience. Sincerity over strategy.
And I will argue that creativity without an external target turns you into a digital ghost. You exist in the ether, but you interact with nothing. True impact relies on identifying a highly specific external individual, what Seth Godin calls the minimum viable audience.
Okay, let me lay out why the internal compass is so vital. Creating for external validation, even a small group, it inevitably leads to commoditization.
How so?
Well, look at the work of Srinivas Rao. He argues that the greatest rewards come from bringing a personal vision into reality, regardless of the reception. Rick Rubin says the goal is not to fit in.
Right, but Rubin is producing for massive pop stars.
Sure, but his philosophy is about trusting your own instincts and completely ignoring market demands. Look at Maria Popova's 10-year retrospective on the Margalian. She built this massive platform by keeping a personal record of her own intellectual development.
Yes, she calls it an artifact of her own mind.
Exactly. She didn't cater to what readers wanted. She resisted the tyranny of algorithms. The audience of one is the self. The first audience is always yourself, and if you can't entertain yourself, you'll never survive.
But see, the problem with the internal compass argument is that it strips art of its fundamental purpose, which is communication. If you only create for yourself, you're not an artist, you're just writing a diary.
There is nothing wrong with a diary.
Make love to the world, your story will catch pneumonia.
That's a great visual.
Right? He said you need to write a love letter to the girl next door. You're asking for the time of a total stranger, so you have to respect that exchange. By focusing intensely on a singular external user, you transform self-expression into an act of service.
Okay, but let's look at the psychology of that. If you've ever stared at a blank screen, absolutely terrified to hit publish.
Like I was doing 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. Clinical psychology tells us that creative blocks are physiological symptoms of fear. When your brain focuses on an external audience worrying about their judgment, your nervous system processes that as a threat.
Yeah, the old survival mechanism.
Right. Your amygdala flares up, and the prefrontal cortex, which handles imagination, literally goes offline. Your brain prioritizes survival over art. The only way to restore creative flow is to retreat to the safety of creating for the self.
I mean, you are right about the neuroscience of the freeze response. Mass audience pressure definitely triggers survival mode, but you're presenting a false dichotomy.
How is it false? You either look inward and feel safe, or outward and feel terrified.
Because focusing on a singular external user actually alleviates that fear. It provides clear constraints. When you know exactly who you're talking to, the infinite variables of public judgment they collapse.
Into what?
Into a solvable equation. Take professional speechwriters, like Rob Knoll. He writes for an absolute audience of one, his principal speaker. If the speaker rejects it, he fails.
Which sounds incredibly stressful.
But it doesn't cause the amygdala to shut down. because the extreme empathy required to capture that one person's voice creates a psychological safety net. You're not guessing what the faceless void wants. That constraint is liberating.
Wait, let me push back on this idea of extreme empathy. If I am writing a speech entirely in someone else's voice, or answering Seth Godin's hypothetical swimming pool construction questions on a blog,
To help a frustrated homeowner, yeah.
aren't I essentially just writing a technical manual? How does that fulfill Vonnegut's mandate that practicing an art is supposed to make your soul grow?
It makes your soul grow because stepping outside of your own anxiety is transformative.
But you're just executing a task. Think about us, right? Think about cats. Why do cats jump and play in the middle of the living room at 3 a.m. when absolutely no humans are watching?
Because of instinct?
Because of the jobe of the leap. We don't need an audience to express our physical nature. We just do it. If my entire creative apparatus is directed to solve my neighbor's problem, I'm erasing my own voice.
No. Godin calls it emotional labor, showing up with care to change someone else's emotional state, from confused to confident. That stretches your capacity for connection. Empathy isn't erasing your voice, it's applying it to something larger than your own immediate gratification.
But doing emotional labor for one person doesn't scale. Eventually, the work has to meet the world. If you only write a love letter to the girl next door, how does that translate into cultural resonance?
That is the brilliant paradox of the minimum viable audience. Targeting a specific external individual is actually the only reliable strategy for massive scale. Look at the design thinking methodology of extreme users.
Like what IDEO does?
Yes, exactly. When they design a product, they don't look at the average consumer. They design for an outlier. The classic example is the OXO Good Grips potato peeler.
Oh, right, the one with the thick rubber handle?
Yeah, the founder watched his wife, who had severe arthritis, struggle with a standard metal peeler. He didn't design for everyone. He designed specifically for her, an extreme user who couldn't grip a thin handle.
Okay, so he solved her specific problem.
But here is the mechanism of scale. By solving the problem for that highly demanding audience of one, you create a superior product for the mainstream. A young chef without arthritis still prefers that peeler because it's just fundamentally better. Specificity scales.
I don't deny that works for kitchen gadgets. Functionality scales that way, sure. But I fundamentally challenge that this external targeting generates massive resonance in art or ideas.
Why wouldn't it?
Because of Srinivas Rao's creative paradox. It is exactly when you completely abandon the desire to please others that you reach millions. You have to have the courage to be ignored. Look at David Bowie.
Bowie is an interesting case for sure.
He's the perfect case. He didn't design his personas for an extreme user demographic. When a sound became successful, he actively abandoned it. He ducked the momentum of his own career to avoid becoming a commodity.
But
let me just finish this thought. He was his own extreme user. The future you is the only audience that matters. Sincerity over strategy is what scales in art, not utility.
But Bowie's sincerity didn't exist in a vacuum. His shape-shifting was a brilliant form of communication with a very specific listener. The alienated kids, the ones who didn't fit into the rigid mainstream, they were his audience of one.
He wasn't catering to them, though.
He was signaling to them. The reason the extreme user methodology works in art is about finding a pure human need. You bypass the cynical mass marketing noise because you're actually seeing the other person.
I think you're conflating visibility with catering, and Maria Popova explicitly warns against these contracts of cynicism in the digital age. The internet conditions us to think success is observing what the market wants and then manufacturing it.
Which is terrible, yes.
If they want outrage, you give them outrage. I argue Godin's market-driven empathy flirts dangerously with that cynicism. The role of the creator is to elevate the discourse. You have to supply a transcendent vision the market didn't even know it was allowed to want.
I have to push back hard on that. You're equating external focus with base pandering. Identifying a minimum viable audience is the exact opposite of cheap outrage. Look at Steve Jobs in the early days of Apple.
Jobs notoriously refused to use focus groups. He mocked them.
Yes, he fiercely said no to the market, but he was a tyrant for the user experience. He exercised immense empathy for how one specific individual interacts with technology.
He was just projecting his own insanely demanding standards. He was the ultimate audience of one for his own products.
No, He bullied his engineers into making the inside of the computer, the circuit boards no one would see, look beautiful, because he imagined the specific user feeling that invisible quality. That isn't cynical marketing. That is the highest form of service.
But if you are constantly scanning the horizon for someone to serve, your work has no intrinsic value. It's totally dependent on the presence of an audience. Think about Van Gogh.
Oh, Van Gogh.
He sold virtually nothing in his lifetime. He painted because he had to. If he had adopted the minimum viable audience framework, he would have stopped painting sunflowers and started painting portraits for the local bourgeois just to get views, so to speak.
That is a beautiful, melancholic notion, but it misses a crucial historical fact. Van Gogh was not painting into the void.
He was incredibly isolated.
He was, but he constantly sent his paintings to his brother Theo. He wrote letters endlessly explaining his work. He desperately wanted to be witnessed by someone he cared about. Theo was his audience of one.
Okay, that is a fair point about Theo. Keeping your art entirely to yourself under the guise of integrity can very often just be a shield for cowardice. It protects you from rejection. Identifying an audience forces you to say, I made this for you. Does it help? Well, let's pull back and look at where we've landed, because we are touching on the absolute core of the creative dilemma.
Yeah.
My position remains that the creative anchor must be internal. To survive the cacophony of the internet, the algorithm prison, you must be your own primary audience. Like Bowie or Popova, the most enduring work comes from an unapologetic commitment to the self.
And my position remains that the true alchemy of creation lies in the connection. Art in a vacuum denies its own potential. Defining the smallest group of people that care about your perspective transforms self-expression into profound empathy.
I will say, despite our opposing frameworks, there is a deep convergence here. We both vehemently reject the legacy mindset of the mass market.
Oh, absolutely. The middle ground is dead. Attempting to appeal to the average consumer just dilutes the art.
It damages your psychological well-being, and it fails. The only guaranteed failure is trying to speak to everybody.
Yeah, you either constrain your audience to exactly yourself or exactly one other person.
It leaves us with an incredible tension. The pull between self-actualization and human connection.
Between the desire to express and a desire to be understood.
Exactly. I encourage everyone listening to revisit the essays of Rao, Godin, Popova, and Vonnegut, because when you are staring at a screen that says you have exactly one view, you have to decide why you're going to keep talking.
You know, looking at it now, I think I'm okay with the one view.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, we're just two cats sitting at microphones in a quiet room. I think I just want to record the next session for you and me, regardless of the stats.
I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Thank you for listening to the debate.